On a late evening in the street, animals were discussing a certain legend according to which, if a homeless cat falls in love with a human, it can become one of them. Although most of the gathered animals did not believe the storyteller, a large white cat was intrigued by what he heard. During the conversation, it became known that the story indeed resembled a falsehood, yet one fluffy friend dreamt so fervently of it that he was the only one who sincerely believed in it. Reflecting on what he had heard, the homeless pet remembered a high school student he had loved long ago. For this reason, the white cat immediately ran in search of the dear person to him. The next day, the main character was taking exams before the holidays. Having finished with his studies, the young man wanted to go home, but as he passed by his classmates who were planning to go for a drink, they called out to him and even suggested resting together. Han Yowell rudely refused them, which greatly angered them, as he didn't even try to be polite to them. As the boy walked on, the guys began to discuss his unbearable character, and the fact that they would not want to be friends with him. This was overheard by the college student, which made him very sad. Although he did not try to get close to anyone, he constantly received such unpleasant comments about himself. People expected more from the young man because of his handsome appearance. Not receiving anything, they were disappointed and left him alone. That's why the boy had no friends and did not want to make any, as he was sure that nothing would change. Leaving the educational institution, Yowell wanted to call his uncle when suddenly a white and fluffy cat jumped out of the bushes to him. It scared the young man, but also intrigued him. The main character did not even have time to take a closer look at the fluffy friend when a crowd of cat lovers rushed to him. 3 young girls were delighted with him and even treated him to food. The young man then called his relative about part-time work during the holidays. He promised to start work today, as he did not want to waste time. Closer to the evening, when the college student was already finishing his first trial day, his relative informed him that he could have taken his time getting to work and rested first. Yowell, however, explained that he wanted to earn more money, so the earlier he started, the better. With the money earned, he wanted to buy a video game. At the cat cafe where the boy worked, there were pets, so he was asked to feed them. When the young man poured food for the fluffy friends, he unexpectedly noticed the familiar white cat from the college yard in the house. Of course, the student thought he was mistaken, but this was not the case. He simply could not believe that the homeless animal had made such a long journey from school to the cafe. Late in the evening, when Yowell was returning home, he was convinced that he was wrong in his assumptions. The large white cat shocked him by coming to his apartment after him. The protagonist reluctantly washed his fluffy companion in his dwelling. It seemed that the white cat was equally displeased with the situation, yet he was given no choice. Half an hour before, when the young man noticed the animal near the entrance door of his house, he was astonished by the fact that it had followed him directly from the cafe. Moreover, the boy was amazed by the very thought that this particular white and large cat had taken a liking to him for unknown reasons. In turn, the cat very persistently rubbed against the college student and meowed, as a sign of confirmation that he wished to accompany him to the apartment. As endearing as this was, Yowell understood that he should not give in to temptation and bring a homeless animal along with him. For this reason, he tried to refuse the furry friend and verbally explain that it should go back out to the street. In justification of his own decision, the boy told that the white cat could stay and live at his uncle's establishment, and there they would see each other periodically. It seems that the refusal was greatly disliked by the pet, as it did not allow the protagonist to close the door in front of him and forcefully barged into the stranger's dwelling. Then the young man grabbed the homeless animal and attempted to carry it away by force, but it managed to cling its claws onto the furniture to prevent this from happening. In the end, the college student prevailed as he was physically stronger than his fluffy friend. Therefore, he hurried to personally take it out to the street. However, as soon as he did this, the weather significantly worsened and a strong blizzard began. Only this detail forced Yowell to still keep the white cat overnight. He could not allow it to perish from the cold due to his own fault. As soon as the two returned to the dwelling, the protagonist noticed that the homeless animal was very dirty and was soiling his floor. Without much thought, he carried the pet to bathe in the bathroom. After finishing with the bathing procedures, the boy personally dried the furry friend's fur with a hairdryer. He was amazed that it turned out to be white, not gray. Now, the white cat resembled a cloud due to its fluffy and extremely charming appearance. Unfortunately, the young man got very dirty while washing and drying the animal, so as soon as he noticed this, he immediately hurried to take a shower. The college student undressed and left the pet with his dirty clothes in the room while he went to the bathroom. Then the cat approached the clothes to sniff them. As soon as the white cat was convinced that Yowul was indeed the person he had previously loved, it rejoiced and went to enjoy life in its new home. Lying on a stranger's sofa, the homeless animal recalled one of the meetings with the boy in the past, as well as details of how he took care of it during that period. Thoughts of this delighted the furry friend, so he quickly fell asleep. A little later, when the pet woke up, he noticed that the young man had already gone to sleep in his room. Of course, he went to him to keep him company. The white cat jumped onto the boy's bed and attentively looked at his peacefully sleeping face. Unexpectedly, he kissed Yowul, initially on the cheek as a sign of his boundless love, and then on the lips. In the next moment, the formerly homeless animal suddenly, as the legend had foretold earlier, transformed into a real human. At first, the white cat did not even notice its transformation into another creature, silently admiring his beloved young man. When he realized that the legend turned out to be true, he was so happy that he could not believe what had happened. The werewolf examined his new appearance in the mirror. Although he now had the body of a sturdy man, the white ears and tail still remained with him. Unexpectedly, as soon as he was convinced of the reality of his own dream coming true, the transformed pet screamed with joy, almost waking up the young man who had been peacefully sleeping all this time. Immediately after, the white cat sat down next to the boy on the bed again. This time he began to touch his body willfully, obviously wanting to kiss him again. Since the protagonist was asleep, the werewolf was unimpeded in realizing his intention. In a moment, he began to touch the boy's body with his lips everywhere, calling him by name and asking him to wake up. Unfortunately, Yowul was sleeping very soundly, so instead of waking up, he began to dream about what was happening to him. Moreover, the college student saw the owner of the white tail in his dreams as well. At first, he heard a male voice calling him, and only after did he meet the werewolf, whom he had accidentally sheltered earlier in his apartment. The young man believed that the dream would be pleasant, but as soon as he saw the white cat in human form, he was surprised, for he did not think that his imagination would present him with such a fantasy involving a man with a tail and ears. Unexpectedly, the transformed animal kissed the boy in the dream just as it did in reality. He was very embarrassed, so he began to resist. While the protagonist assured the white cat that he did not want to engage in tactile actions with a stranger even in dreams, the latter continued to touch the stranger's body and do what he wanted. Early in the morning, Yowul woke up quite surprised by what had happened to him in the middle of the night. He felt awkward that he had fantasized about such things in his dreams, and therefore, not even suspecting the existence of the werewolf, he hurried to work. During the morning bathing procedures, the protagonist noticed strange marks on his neck. He was astonished, for such marks were left by the stranger with ears and tail in his dream. However, since such a thing could not happen in real life, the boy decided that he simply hit something while sleeping. Of course, despite this, memories of what happened at night reminded him of themselves and greatly embarrassed the college student himself. In the end, having somehow finished washing up, the young man pondered what to do with the homeless animal he had picked up shortly before. Without much thought, the young man decided that he could leave it with his uncle for temporary care, as he ran a cat cafe and knew how to take care of furry friends. It seemed that the pet belonged to someone before it ended up on the street. For this reason, he decided to call his relative and inquire about his opinion on the matter. When the white cat heard that they wanted to take him to another person's establishment, he immediately began to protest and interfere with Yowul's phone conversation. Despite this, the young man was stronger, so he skillfully kept the homeless animal aside, while agreeing with his uncle that he would bring the pet to the cafe that very day. Unexpectedly, the furry friend kissed the protagonist on the lips again and thereby shocked him. At that very moment, he transformed into a human and verbally expressed his protest against moving to the relative's cat establishment. The college student was horrified by what was happening, as he immediately recognized in the unfamiliar werewolf the mysterious man from his dream. Memories made him blush and lose his composure for a moment. Initially, the protagonist thought he was still dreaming, as a naked man with white ears and a tail sat before him. However, as soon as he pinched himself on the leg and realized that this was all reality, he immediately grasped the strangeness of what was happening to him at the moment. Meanwhile, the telephone conversation with his uncle continued, so the boy had to explain himself to him, as he had previously screamed in surprise. Nevertheless, it was quite difficult to do so, as the werewolf's actions prevented Yowol from speaking normally. Eventually, the college student partially lied to his relative, claiming he had simply fallen off the sofa, hence the scream during their conversation. As he explained the situation, the troublesome white cat continued its strange attempts to make close contact with the young man, similar to what had already happened in the dream, but this time it clearly intended to go all the way. The protagonist was very embarrassed by what was happening, but at the same time, he could not show his emotions until the phone conversation ended. For this reason, without much thought, the young man ended the dialogue with his relative in order to properly communicate with the unexpected object of his own imagination from his dreams. First and foremost, Yowol ordered the werewolf to stop touching him and then expressed his indignation at the marks on his neck, which were obviously his work and not accidentally acquired injuries. The white cat, however, completely ignored everything the boy said. Instead, he honestly declared his desire for more from him. To confirm his words, the tail owner gently touched the college student's cheek. As the transformed pet insisted that he would now stay with his object of love forever, the protagonist bewilderingly realized that he was in a hopeless situation with a creature that was now much stronger and larger than him. Soon, Yowol arrived at work with a significant delay, for which his uncle tried to scold him. Surprisingly, the young man took the warning seriously and promised to arrive on time in the future. Before starting work, the relative inquired about the whereabouts of the white cat they had previously discussed on the phone. The college student confessed that he did not bring the homeless animal with him because it was sound asleep. Supposedly, the boy did not want to disturb it. In reality, he simply could not refuse the homeless animal permission to stay with him after the awkward moments that had occurred between them. Earlier, during the so-called preparations for work, the werewolf behaved indecently and continued to insist on more intimate contact with his beloved young man. Yowol was categorically against this, so he openly informed the transformed white cat about it, but it did not listen to him and continued to fulfill its own desires. At some point, the boy even liked it, as he was able to satisfy his physical needs in the process, but immediately after, he felt very uncomfortable. After completing the unusual actions with the werewolf, the protagonist realized that he was late for work, so he hastily dressed and ran to it. He asked the transformed animal to stay home until he returned. Of course, the white cat was happy to comply with this condition. Throughout the working day, Yowol reflected on what had happened to him and in his apartment earlier. He found it hard to believe that everything that had happened was real, but most of all, he was worried about the werewolf he had left alone in his dwelling. Soon, thoughts of the pet forced the boy to admit to himself that it was quite attractive in human form. After some time, during a conversation with his uncle, the protagonist realized that he felt uncomfortable even returning home, so he wanted to stay overnight at his relative's place. The boss refused him without hesitation, despite being worried about his saddened nephew, knowing that Yowol had a white cat at home that needed care and food. When the cat cafe closed for the day and the protagonist had assisted with the main cleaning, his relative let him go home early. Before parting, the young man wanted to ask an important question, but unfortunately hesitated and therefore left the premises mid-sentence. The boy's strange behavior surprised the boss, but he decided to ignore it, only asking him to take care of himself on the way home as a farewell. Yowell responded indifferently, thereby causing his relative to worry even more. On his way home, the college student pondered how his life had drastically changed since the start of the holidays. These changes were so extraordinary that he couldn't even tell anyone about them. Since his uncle had been his only support, he couldn't possibly tell him about what the werewolf had tried to do with the young man. The thought was too embarrassing for him. Apart from these concerns, the boy was also worried about what to expect from the white cat he had picked up from the street. Yowell didn't want to enter his apartment because of this. Unexpectedly, when the college student was already near his home, he heard the familiar voice of the homeless animal. In human form, it appeared on the balcony, waiting for the young man. As the pet inquired why the protagonist wasn't coming up to the dwelling, the latter was shocked by the sight of the completely naked werewolf. Therefore, the boy started yelling at the owner of the white tail and asked him to immediately go inside the apartment. He himself hurried into his dwelling, worried that someone might accidentally see his guest from the street in such a state. The white cat was very happy to see him, and as befits an animal, first asked to be fed. However, Yowell ignored this request and instead started looking for suitable clothes for him. Soon he ordered the werewolf to wear his clothes, which were too large for the protagonist. Unfortunately, they were too small for the pet. Although he dressed, it became obvious that he was uncomfortable and cramped in the foreign outfit. When he tried to undress again, Yowell stopped him. He gently asked the homeless animal to wear the undersized clothes until better options appeared. As an argument, the boy stated that if the white cat wanted to become human, he needed to behave like one. This worked, and the tail owner agreed to all the conditions. While the college student was stopping the stranger's undressing, he accidentally touched the guest's firm chest. Now the boy became interested in his toned body to the extent that he unconsciously felt it. These actions embarrassed him, so he stopped. Eventually, the protagonist changed the topic of conversation and went to prepare food for the werewolf. He assumed that since the latter had transformed into a human, he could eat something other than cat food. Unexpectedly, the white cat stopped the young man by pushing him onto the bed. He mentioned that he noticed the boy's interest in chest muscles and therefore, undressing, offered to touch them again. This greatly embarrassed Yowell, so he started to deny his obvious desire to touch the stranger's body. Despite this, the werewolf stated that he would not deny his own desires regarding the young man. Soon, he resumed his attempts to prove his love for the protagonist through physical contact. Although the latter refused, he no longer resisted the process. When the intimate actions were about to progress to a new, more personal level, the college student still began to express his indignation, as he was very worried. As soon as Yowell voiced his protest aloud, the white cat returned to his previous fluffy friend form. Although the boy didn't understand the reason for his luck, he was glad to avoid the continuation of the events. The pet, however, had no choice but to accept this. Late in the evening, the werewolf Biksu watched television, intrigued by a show featuring performances of famous pop singers from his country. Simultaneously, he indulged in chips like a true human while waiting for the protagonist to return from work. Upon the young man's return, the white cat eagerly greeted him and received a small present from him. Yowell brought the transformed animal different clothes, much larger in size than the previous ones, as they belonged to his uncle. Shortly before, the college student had shown his relative strange photos of people in oversized clothes, calling it a style in an attempt to explain his request to borrow some items. Surprisingly, this plan worked, and the man gave away some clothes. The tail owner agreed to wear someone else's clothes despite them being worn by someone else before. The boy was very pleased with this, as he couldn't afford to buy new clothes for his pet. Biksu received a whole pile of clothes, but he didn't want to try them all on. For this reason, the white cat pushed everything aside and demonstratively knelt before Yowell, stating he had no desire to engage in such activities. Of course, this displeased the protagonist, who tried to scold the pet. Unexpectedly, during their argument, the boy mentioned that he found the white cat very cute in his animal form. This slightly astonished the werewolf, seemingly prompting the tail owner to reflect. In a moment, he began boldly touching the young man's body, thus embarrassing him. This had become a routine for the college student, yet he still vividly reacted to Biksu's affection. During the process, the boy mentally confessed to himself that he liked engaging in such activities with the werewolf, but he did not dare to say it out loud. As the situation approached more embarrassing actions, particularly a kiss, Yoel suddenly expressed his protest, and at that moment, the white cat reverted to his original form. This gave the protagonist some understanding of when and why Biksu's transformations occur. The next morning, while working at the cat cafe, his uncle suggested they live together, which greatly shocked the young man. He immediately declined the offer, arguing that he didn't want to become the object of his relative's excessive care. The man explained that he simply valued his nephew very much and was always happy to spend time with him, despite the fact that he was growing up quickly. During the conversation between the two, the boss asked the boy if he had named his pet. He replied that he named it Biksu because it means unemployed. Although the uncle was surprised by this, Yoel pointed to the lazy and constantly sleeping white cat, indicating that he had made a good choice. When the workday ended, the college student called his fluffy friend, and they went home together. On the way back to the apartment, the protagonist smiled as he remembered the experiment he had conducted with Biksu's transformation. Every time he refused the pet, it instantly reverted to its original form. Although the young man considered such actions too harsh towards the white cat, he couldn't protect himself from overly tactile actions otherwise. Reflecting on this, the boy mentally admitted to himself that he wanted to see more in the werewolf than just a pet. At that moment, Biksu kissed him as they had returned home, which meant he could become human again. The tail owner did this without warning, greatly embarrassing the protagonist. Despite this, it seemed that Yoel enjoyed what was happening. Although this was the case, the young man didn't miss the opportunity to grumble at the white cat for such a stunt. In response, the latter hurried to kiss him again. After finishing such an embarrassing action, the werewolf informed him that the boy was obliged to take responsibility for taking him in and making him his pet. This news greatly shocked the college student, but he didn't argue, only doubting whether he could fulfill this responsibility. Shortly, the protagonist taught the werewolf Biksu how to write. He tried hard, but it was evident that he did not enjoy the activity. The young man noticed that the transformed animal disliked the learning process, but he could do nothing about it, as knowing the basics of the language was essential for a normal life in the human world. Unexpectedly, during the lesson, the doorbell rang. The boy assumed it was the delivery person, so he went to answer the door. As soon as he was distracted from closely observing the others learning, Biksu immediately forgot about the alphabet and, grabbing the TV remote, decided to entertain himself in his favorite way. Yoel had been ordering food repeatedly, as they required much more for the two of them than he did alone before. When he noticed that the werewolf started doing things other than what was required of him, the boy turned off the TV and scolded him for it. The protagonist behaved like a parent, as he considered it extremely important to teach the pet the basic rules of writing. Therefore, he explained that until the daily lessons were over, the white cat could not rest. Biksu disliked this news, but he had previously promised to learn obediently, so he now had no choice. As the college student unpacked the groceries, the werewolf noticed the box in which they were stored. Without much thought, he decided to climb into it, like the animal he was. As soon as the tail owner was inside, he felt happy. However, the box immediately collapsed due to the creature's large size and the groceries scattered around the room. This greatly angered the protagonist, as it added even more mess to the apartment. For this reason, he scolded the transformed pet for the mischief he had caused. Only later, when the young man realized he had overdone it with negative emotions, he tried to explain to the white cat that with the change of form, his size had increased, so fitting into a small box simply would not work. The werewolf took note of this and approached the boy to help prepare the meal. This attention from Biksu made the college student feel embarrassed, as he mistakenly thought he would be approached with excessive attention, kisses, and other caresses again. This did not happen, which made Yoel feel ashamed of his own thoughts. It seemed that he was the only one who really desired those actions but hid it. While reflecting on this, the protagonist noticed a peculiarity in the pet's behavior. For the first time ever, he decided to help with something on his own. The boy was so surprised by this that he even thought the tail owner was acting this way for the chance to watch TV, but it turned out not to be the case. The information pleased the college student, so he hurried to thank the white cat for the help with head pats. This gesture surprised the pet. Moreover, Biksu was embarrassed by the received affection, and in turn, the protagonist asked him to help with household chores more often. The werewolf agreed to everything, just to get a little more attention from the young man. Mentally, he noted that this way, he could initiate actions from Yoel. Late in the evening, after the boy took a shower, he realized he was very tired from the day. Therefore, he decided to go to bed early and honestly told the white cat about it. The cat was already waiting for him in bed, which slightly embarrassed him. It seemed that the college student remembered past close contacts with the werewolf, making him feel awkward. Despite this, he heeded the request of the transformed animal to lie down next to him. When they were in bed together, it became clear that the protagonist was expecting some actions from Biksu. Surprisingly, the werewolf just hugged the young man and wished him a good night. Such distant and decent behavior from the white cat greatly amazed the boy. Therefore, while the pet slept, he observed his sleeping face with slight bewilderment. In the end, he admitted that he found him cute not only in animal form but also as a human. On another workday for the protagonist, as he served customers in the cat cafe, he was unconsciously distracted by thoughts that had been troubling him for some time. The young man realized that in the recent days of living together with the werewolf, the latter had not once tried to kiss him or persuade him into tactile actions. The boy didn't understand the reason for the white cat's strange behavior, and therefore mistakenly thought it was his fault. Yoel decided that the pet was deliberately distancing himself from him. Furthermore, during his reflections, the college student even believed that he had disappointed the werewolf or had become a bore to him. The abundance of thoughts hindered his work. The customers, who were obviously dissatisfied with the excessively slow service, noticed this. Therefore, the establishment's manager decided to expedite the situation by helping settle a customer's order and then expressing his anger to his nephew for not fulfilling his duties due to his own concerns. Therefore, the uncle asked the protagonist to focus on work, not unnecessary worries. In response, the boy asked for advice about what had been bothering him all this time. He inquired why a person might suddenly start reacting differently to another. The man didn't know exactly what was being referred to, but tried to think sensibly. He said that the reason could be resentment, disappointment, or the wrongdoing of the other person. Naturally, this only further troubled Yoel, as it was exactly what he feared. As the college student fretted over what was happening between him and the werewolf, his uncle asked if his nephew was in a relationship with anyone, as such problems often arose in romantic couples. Of course, the young man hurriedly answered negatively, not wanting to give his relative a reason to continue developing this topic in their conversation. He was only concerned about Biksu's changeable actions, and moreover, Yoel was angry with him because of this, so he decided to resolve the misunderstanding as soon as he returned home from work. When the boy actually came home, he was very negatively disposed towards the white cat, obviously wanting to express all his thoughts to him. The transformed animal, on the contrary, warmly greeted the so-called master of the house, thereby causing him to feel awkward. Although the young man wanted to, he did not dare to tell the pet everything. He realized how shameful it would look from the outside. Therefore, instead of telling him about his own concerns and asking directly about the reason for the werewolf's aloofness, the protagonist yelled at him for watching TV again. Biksu didn't understand this action at all, but no other explanations were provided. The college student, once again, immersed himself in his own thoughts about the situation that had been troubling him all this time. He was ashamed of what was happening, but he was also very embarrassed by the thought of asking directly. It seemed that Yoel needed advice from an outsider, someone more experienced in such matters. Unexpectedly, the white cat himself interrupted the contemplation of the situation. He sat extremely close to the boy and inquired about the reasons for his strange behavior. The protagonist couldn't confess everything, so he tried to avoid discussing it. The werewolf didn't insist on it, but understood that something was bothering the young man. For this reason, he hugged him tightly, obviously wanting to support him. Yoel mistakenly thought that he was finally being given the attention he had been deprived of, so he felt embarrassed. Then the transformed animal stated that he would never force the protagonist into affection and other actions if he did not consent, so he shouldn't worry about trivial matters. Moreover, he confessed that he liked touching the college student, but doing so against his will was wrong. It seemed that this was the main reason for the changes in the pet's behavior. This revelation astonished Yoel so much that he blushed intensely. Also, the boy began to understand that to get what he wanted, he would have to ask the white cat aloud. Noticing such a peculiar reaction from the young man, Biksu himself realized his desires and directly inquired about the accuracy of his guesses. Although the protagonist tried to deny it, it was futile. The werewolf asked him to speak aloud about his needs in the future. Obviously, the boy felt very uncomfortable, so he reacted overly emotionally to the information he heard and jumped out of bed. Nevertheless, he didn't want to end the conversation with the pet so abruptly, so he suggested they go for a walk outside together. He was confident that nothing bad would happen, as it was too dark late in the evening for anyone to notice the peculiarities in the appearance of the animal transformed into a human. Thank you for watching. If you want me to continue this story, please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. See you very soon.